All right, let's get into it. We're not just talking about training nurses in the traditional sense. We're talking about something bigger, about designing the architects of our future healthcare system. This is a story about a new blueprint for a new kind of professional.
So let me start by asking you a question. When you think about a nurse today, what's the single most important tool they have? Is it a stethoscope, a syringe? What comes to mind?
Well, here's a little hint for you. Whatever you're thinking of, it's probably not in their medical bag. See, the most important tool, it isn't a physical object at all. It's a completely new way of thinking, a new set of critical lenses for looking at the world.
And that brings us right to this new educational blueprint. I mean, think about the challenges today. We need to prepare nurses for a world dealing with global health crises, an avalanche of online misinformation, and even artificial intelligence that might be biased. So how on earth do you do that? Well, the answer seems to lie in a combination of a couple of key frameworks and a really powerful real-world example of how to make it all work.
First up is this idea of global competence, which comes from the OECD. And this is not just about, knowing facts about different countries. It's way deeper than that. It's the ability to really analyze global issues, to genuinely understand different points of view, and then, and this is the key part, to act in a way that helps everybody. It's about being a global citizen, right there at the patient's bedside.
But here's the catch. When this idea was discussed in classrooms, a common critique was that it sounds aspirational rather than actionable. It's a beautiful goal, but how do you actually do it? How does a nurse apply this idea of collective well-being when they're in the middle of a chaotic 12-hour shift? That's the real question, isn't it?
Okay, so let's bring in our second framework. It's called Critical Digital Literacies, or CDL for short. Now, this is not your typical how to use a computer class, not at all. This is about teaching nurses to question the technology itself, to ask who holds the power online, whose voices get heard, and how hidden algorithms might be shaping patient care without anyone even noticing.
And this is exactly why CDL is so incredibly important. The AI tools we're starting to rely on, the electronic health records, they can actually perpetuate the biases that already exist in our society. If the data they learn from is biased, well, their outputs are going to be biased too. Nurses need to be the ethical gatekeepers of this technology, not just people who passively use it.
So, how do you actually teach this stuff? Well, a redesign of a teacher education program at the University of Ontario Institute of Technology actually gives us a fantastic model. They didn't just throw new tech into the classroom for the sake of it. No, they integrated it with a deep sense of ethical awareness. That's CDL right there. They wove mental health training into everything and really pushed for reflective practice, which builds that empathy at the heart of global competence. It's a perfect parallel for what nursing needs.
Okay, so we've talked about the big ideas, the theory, but what does any of this actually look like in a hospital with a real live patient? Let's connect these concepts to the actual human stories where they matter the most.
So, picture this. A patient who has just recently immigrated to a new country. They're trying to figure out a really confusing healthcare system, find reliable information, but they are hitting a massive wall.
And here's the shift in thinking. This isn't just a simple communication problem. It's a global competence issue. A nurse who gets this framework doesn't just see a patient with a language barrier. They see a person trying to navigate complex global systems. And so that nurse becomes an advocate, actively bridging those cultural and language gaps. That, right there, is global competence in action.
All right, now let's jump to a totally different situation. A patient shows up at the ER, and they're absolutely terrified. But their fear isn't just coming from their symptoms, it's being supercharged by something they read online. And this is where critical digital literacies become a literal life-saving skill. The nurse understands that online algorithms are often built to reward fear and sensationalism. So their job isn't just to treat the physical problem, but to become a guide, to help the patient figure out what sources to trust, to see the bias, and to navigate all of that digital noise.
Now, it would be really easy to just stop right there and say, problem solved. But the reality on the ground is so much more complicated. Trying to put these frameworks into practice means we have to face some very real and very tough tensions in healthcare today.
So for starters, there's the problem of burnout. Nurses and nursing students are already drowning in information. So how do we teach these essential digital skills without just adding to the exhaustion and causing even more information fatigue? It's a real balancing act.
And then there's the system itself. It's one thing to talk about big global ideals in a classroom. It's a completely different thing to try and practice them in a hospital that's critically understaffed, short on resources, and just trying to keep its head above water. How do you possibly bridge that huge gap? And finally, there's what might be the biggest question of all. As we keep pushing for more tech, more digital efficiency, are we running the risk of accidentally chipping away at the human connection that is the absolute soul of nursing? That's a danger we have to take very, very seriously.
Wrestling with these tough questions brings us right back to where we started. The goal here isn't just to bolt on a few new skills to the old model. The real goal is to cultivate a fundamentally new kind of healthcare professional, an architect who can actually help design a better system from the inside out.
You can really think of this as a three-step evolution. Step 1, of course, is mastering the technical skills. That's the foundation. But today's world demands more. The next step is to engage critically, to question the very tools and systems we use every day. And that's the leap that makes the final step possible, becoming an architect who is actively shaping a fair, more compassionate healthcare future for all of us.
And at the end of the day, this is what it's all about. The world doesn't just need more nurses who are good with computers. It needs practitioners who can navigate these incredibly complex social and technical systems with two tools that will never, ever go out of style: empathy and integrity. Now that is a blueprint worth building.